to Mindbind, a mental health podcast for everyone. Since our first episode in 2016, we have been sharing stories of recovery, engaging with experts, and tackling the stigma associated with mental illness. The Mindbind podcast is produced by Ontario Shores Centre for Mental Health Sciences and is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Welcome to the Mindbind podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Mathers, and today we're talking caregivers in mental health with actually 4 guests, but we're going to do 2 different segments today, and we're starting with our first segment. We have Dr. Mary Chu, who's a research coordinator here at Ontario Shores. Welcome.
Thank you. And
Nancy Burns, who's a social worker on our geriatric transitional unit. So thank you both for being here. When you use the word caregiver, it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different populations. On Ontario Shores, and in your experience, what does the term caregiver, how is it defined? Maybe we'll start with you, Mary.
Sure. I think a caregiver, there are so many different terms out there, right? Like care partners, carers, caregivers, but I'm going to quote Rosalynn Carter, the wife of Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter. And, there are only 4 types of people in this world. And there are people who are currently in the role as a caregiver, who have been as a caregiver and will be a caregiver. And then there are people who would need a caregiver. So we are bound to be, be engaged in this realm of, caregiving at some point in our life journey. And in my work with caregivers the past decade, I feel like, caregivers come in all shapes and forms and, different walks of life. But we share, a very kind of like a common theme is like sometimes we are just, happen to be a caregiver, and we may or may not have the skills to kind of, face the day-to-day issues that come up. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, I think.
From your perspective, Nancy, being on a unit and seeing our patients, on a day-to-day basis, what are the roles, like maybe what are some of the tangible things caregivers are doing in the kind of the recovery journey of our patients here on your particular unit?
Mm-hmm. So on GTU, the caregivers, as Mary said, come from all walks of life. They can be wives, they can be children, they can be extended relatives. They're coming into us with a lot of questions, often about diagnosis, about what do they need to be doing. They're usually extraordinarily stressed. They need information. They need support themselves, which I think is the one thing that caregivers don't often take into account. So much of the focus goes on the patient and the recovery journey of the patient that they kind of get lost in the background somewhere. So a lot of our caregivers, I feel, need to be given the permission to take care of themselves as well, besides what they're doing for the patient.
The term caregiver may not be new, but it's certainly been more prevalent late, like I'd say in like mainstream culture, this idea that caregiver is a role, what it requires, and I think you mentioned like looking after yourself. The 10 years that you've been in this field, like what has the evolution of the caregiver role, like what has that been like?
What Nancy was saying, just echoing how, when I engage a caregiver 10 years ago, they would come to you with these unexplainable kind of, and they feel shame in terms of, that they feel helpless and they don't know how to articulate that, that they actually need support. Now we have, evolved, I guess, in services, in research, and public awareness as well, like you said. And so caregivers are more aware of, that they have those needs, and it all comes from the fact that you have to put on the oxygen mask yourself first before you can actually put the oxygen mask on the person who need help, right? So they are more aware of that they would need to have the support, and they would ask for it now. And obviously, as healthcare professionals and as researchers, we all act as an advocate for this group of people as well, and making sure that they are matched with the proper care and support, and trying to advocate for them.
A caregiver in the in the geriatric space, some might wonder, you're not necessarily dealing all with older adults, but in a lot of cases you are, people who are nearing the end of life. So some might question, well, what kind of difference can a caregiver make to somebody who's elderly, that's maybe unwell? But I know that we do see a difference at Ontario Shores in terms of when a caregiver is involved with the patient. And from your experience being on the unit, can you describe maybe the difference that an engaged, educated caregiver, the impact they can have on their loved one?
Absolutely. I think the more information they have on understanding the illness really helps them to respond better to their patient, or to the patient or their family member. I think what Mary was saying, I think there's more recognition. Your question was about how has it evolved. I think there's more recognition that caregivers are impacted, and how they are impacted definitely aids or can hinder the recovery journey of a patient. So I think as caregivers are recognized as an intrinsic part of this, and learning about the illness and learning how to respond, and even recognizing the challenges that they faced, has really helps with the recovery journey, helps them to move along and have a better recovery. I mean, in dementia, you're not necessarily recovering, but you can create less distress, less upset, less distress for everybody.
There is lots of chatter about dementia and related illnesses in terms of the future and what it means for our population, and if numbers continue to rise. From a research perspective, what's going on in the world of dementia, maybe more broadly, and then in particular here at Ontario Shores?
We talk about the the increasing numbers in people who are aging, and who inevitably, some of us are going to need caregiving, and be it support if we have dementia or related illness. But I think the most important thing for dementia research is knowing that behind the disease or behind the condition, there is an individual, there is a person that is still remain and very capable of interacting and of contributing to relationship and connection. And so I think that is actually something that we wanted to look at, is how can caregivers or family members of someone who is living with dementia try to foster and build a meaningful engagement with the person living with dementia, and trying to understand, yes, there are certain things that are lost, or there is a cognitive impairment, but there is still that person that remains, and it helps to kind of understand that, and understand and for the caregiver to understand how best to leverage what is that person that remains.
As you're talking about the person behind the illness, I just started to think about mental health in general, and we talk about stigma in a lot of ways. And I don't know if there's another illness that's been depicted in a more stigmatizing manner than dementia, when you think about how it's perceived or in movies, television, even what we know about it in the media. Nancy, like from what you see on the unit, like when people come in as caregivers, or like, is there a huge education piece that's required just for them understanding the illness? Like, forget about the supports and all the other things we talked about, but maybe what they're experiencing aligning with what they were expecting coming in?
Not necessarily. I think what I find is that people are coming in sicker because patients are staying at home longer, because the system itself can't accommodate everybody the way we should. So I do feel there's a huge educational component. A lot of our families don't really have a clear understanding of what's happening. So we have to take a lot of time to sort of look at timelines and when things happened, and they get very focused on what's next. And so I think the education really helps them to sort of prepare, which I think is very important, depending on where the patient is at that point in time. So I think the educational piece and providing the support for that is crucial when they come to us.
One of the things, a couple of things that we do offer, I believe it's a Teach and Carers program. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what that how that kind of advances the caregiver experience at Ontario Shores?
Sure. Do you want me? So, the Teach program is really about education on the different stages, how to respond to different stages, what the illness is, what to expect. The Carers program is quite different than that. It goes through scenarios to help people practice, which I think is quite unique. So the family members are bringing in specific situations, and they're able to go through those situations individually and come up with a better solution on how to respond. So the group process itself is great because you learn from each other, which we know for many, many years that the group process is the best way to do things rather than doing them individually. Mm-hmm. So they're very distinct groups, but they both serve a really excellent purpose.
Just to add to that, I guess we often talk about, like in healthcare, a stepped care model. Like this is, maybe, part of a stepped care model for our dementia caregivers, where they would, be exposed to the Teach program first, which is more of a psychoeducation program, where they learn about the basics, like Nancy was saying, what are the stages of dementia, what is it, and navigating, the healthcare system, how to communicate with the person living with dementia, and then they can, if appropriate, and and if there is capacity in their time, in their schedule, caregivers can be invited into the Carers program, which is a more of a psychotherapeutic program, where they will have the chance to practice and also go through some problem-solving scenarios with their group members, and being led by clinicians as well.
As we look at into the future, even if it's the near future, research and technology, whether it's stuff going on here or just globally, is the relationship between the two, is that reason for excitement in terms of the care of dementia and what we can possibly do with technology?
For sure, and I'm going to leave that part with Ron Bolano, who will be talking about that because He's an advocate in this realm of innovations and technology. But I can tell you, the exciting part is not only the technology, it's inviting caregivers and actually people living with dementia to test out these products and co-develop these innovations as we go along. And so including the voice of the patients and also the caregiver, and making sure that this is, whatever we're developing with engineers and with innovators, this is actually something that would benefit them. And so that's what is exciting, because, a lot of times in the past, research is kind of done in a vacuum, if you would. But now there's a lot of collaboration and inviting different people with lived experience to participate in the process and making sure that it's something that they want and would find helpful in the end.
You just mentioned the collaboration piece, and I think, I don't know if Nancy, you see that when people come in to the unit with their loved ones. Just how collaborative is that process? Like from the time that you're the person that you love is admitted to the unit and you come on as a caregiver, like what's that collaboration process like?
I think it's valued, and it's more often than not, I would have to say. With the team, definitely we involve family members or whoever the identified caregiver is from the onset. We have an excellent care pathway for that, and we involve the family right from the get-go. And I think that's really important. I think it's key for the great recovery of the patient, but also for the caregiver, because I think that's the recognition now that it's kind of a two-pronged approach.
Well, thank you both very much for being here to cover this topic, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We're continuing the conversation about caregivers and mental health with two additional guests. I'm pleased to welcome Ron Bellino, a family caregiver. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you.
And Elaine Miller, who's a, let me get this right, patient and family relations leader, also heavily involved in our Family Resource Center. Thank you, Elaine, for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to start with you, Ron. Your experience as a caregiver, can you kind of give us a sense of what your journey's been like?
Yeah, sure there, Daryl. So I, an only child, that's what my parents always remind me of, you're the only child, to mom and dad from a Filipino background. My dad, he got Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, a dementia, back in 2007, and for 10 plus years we cared for him in his home back in Scarborough. So that is my mom. She lived with him. There was the cat Lucky, which is always part of the story, part of the caregiving team. I always talk about the caregiving team. And I lived about 20 minutes away. So that was a challenging journey, dealing with dementia. Didn't know about anything about dementia, and I had to kind of get support from researchers, different societies, and yeah, that's simply my story in a nutshell. But over the years, I kind of have become quite an advocate in other spaces, such as technology and innovation, a lot of work with policy. I do get excited with trainees, with those up-and-coming leaders that are looking to do some work in this space. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I know I'm going to go into more detail as we chat a little bit more. Yeah.
Just before
Sure.
just to add or continue on that, your role as a caregiver, like when that is like, I'm guessing thrust upon you, right? Mm-hmm. Like all of a sudden, you're dealing with this diagnosis and an uncertain future. Can you describe maybe the toll that it takes on you as a person when you're accepting that news and then kind of determining your new reality?
Yeah, that's every time someone gets a diagnosis or some news, I've realized at this point, I've had the opportunity to speak to thousands of caregivers, not just here in Canada, but internationally. And you realize how people have different values, how they've grown up, and how they receive things. So there's a cultural play for me. Asian values, it was a little different. My mom and dad didn't really know what dementia was, and we didn't actually put a lot of priority on it. For me, it was just, okay, Dad, how do you want to live your life? with this diagnosis. Okay, so it actually didn't scare us at the beginning. It was later, like 5 years later, when we came with the challenges, is when I started getting scared and worried. Okay, but at the beginning, it was just one of those where, okay, thanks, Doc, for the information and sharing with us this. But for my dad, he just wants to continue living his life, right? And that was how we approached it. Just let's keep moving forward. Whatever challenges come, we'll take that on. But there is, and I think chatted about a little bit earlier about stigma. Okay, so a lot of people already have a stigma when they hear some specific words or diagnosis. And I know, especially with a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, let's say, there's a lot of families I've come across that right away, they're just scared and they stop everything. Or they just change their whole life like it's over. And that's where I kind of have to kind of plant the seeds, or other, I know, great individuals and organizations are trying to change that narrative that, hey, just because you have dementia doesn't mean life is over, okay? You can move forward, you can continue with all the challenges that are gonna come. But some do get scared and they just panic right away. And I think we need to change that. But again, for myself, specifically, it was one where we just said, okay, thanks for that diagnosis, and let's figure this out, and we'll take it on.
You think about your experience, Elaine, when you have caregivers and family members coming, to Ontario Shores, and when they're dealing with a situation maybe similar to Ron and his family, what are some of the things that they're bringing to the table in terms of like emotions they're dealing with, or needs, or what? Like, how are you maybe supporting them in that moment?
Yeah, and first of all, I really can empathize with your situation. My mom also had Alzheimer's as well, and we cared for her for about 7 years. But yeah, I mean, we get family caregivers who come with, they're afraid. They are feeling guilty because they don't know how much they can do. They want to do, but they can't always do as much as they want, so they feel the guilt. There's anger sometimes of, why us, why our family? There's just a whole array of emotions, and some of the educational programming that we offer helps them to kind of unpack some of those emotions, to realize that it's normal to feel this way, and it's like going through the stages of the stages of loss, basically. The various stages they're going to go through, whether it's dementia or whether it's some other mental illness that their loved one has been diagnosed with. They go through that, the stages of anger and denial and all of those things. So we offer a lot of courses to help with their own self-care so that they take care of themselves. As your other guest mentioned, they need to be able to play their role optimally. So we try and teach them or help to coach them around communication so that they can reach out for help, how to advocate for themselves. So sort of, again, giving them permission to ask for help and to ask for information, because it's a huge learning journey, isn't it? I mean, there's just so much that you don't know when you're starting out as a caregiver. And at some point, it makes you a bigger person because you kind of learn what's important, and you learn to live more in the moment rather than extrapolating, oh gosh, what's waiting for me down the road when the disease gets really bad. And you're going to have to change your approach as the person changes too. So just helping them along and giving them confidence, and also commending them for the role that they play, because I think that a lot of the families we see just don't feel like what they're doing is recognized and important. I think that's changed over time, that we recognize how important it is to the recovery of the individual, but also that the family is going through a recovery journey of its own. Just giving them that confidence and knowing that they're not alone. That's a huge thing. Families feel totally out there alone. And sometimes they can't talk to other family who aren't doing what they're doing, or other friends that they have who aren't, supporting somebody with a mental illness. And so just knowing that there's other people out there who can, they can imagine what they're going through, because they're going through it as well. So just that piece is very important.
If I can add there, so Elaine, you said like a dozen great key points there, but I want to just highlight maybe 2 or 3. One is first and foremost, you can't always just rely on a family or friend. Okay, doesn't mean that just because they are related to you or they're close that they'll know what to do, and that they play a specific role. So many, primary caregivers, so the ones that are the lead, assume that just because you have a sibling or an uncle or an aunt, that they're going to fill this role. So sometimes you're going to find other caregivers, in areas that you won't expect. So for me, that was the neighbors, that was the coffee shop. Okay, that would be the random Canada Post person that walks in every day that takes care of my mom for like at least 3 minutes to chat with her. So that's one key piece. And the other piece you did mention was the learning piece. Okay, that if you're going to be a caregiver specifically around dementia, okay, if you're not open to learning, you're going to have a hard battle during that journey. If you can be willing to receive and accept that, okay, this is a time where I got to learn a lot and be open to every comment and idea, you're going to have a better path to that there. So I think that was really important that you said that there. Sometimes that's a battle. It takes like 5 to 10 years just to realize, okay, you're always fighting, all these new things, but if you were open to it, you would be much further. So that is quite important.
Yeah. And I think also, and that also reminds me of the idea of acceptance, because so often when we are faced with a challenge and it's stressful, we kind of resist the urge to adapt to it. And so just teaching people to, you are going to have to accept this, but it can be a really life-changing experience taking care of somebody. It can be really rich. Having those moments with your family member where you're really enjoying being with them at that moment, that there's some good quality of life there for them. That may change tomorrow, but right now we're having a good moment together. So teaching people to really take joy in those moments. Sometimes we just need to be reminded that we don't always come with that approach. So
it has to be a really overwhelming experience, especially at first. But maybe when listening to you, just talk about your experience, it sounds like it can be overwhelming throughout at times. When you're like in your particular experience, obviously you want what's best for your dad, right? You're trying to make those, make the whatever time you have, as best you can, and you're going through it and you're learning and you're on this path. And at what point do you become an advocate? Like when it extends, at what point does it extend beyond your dad? Because now you're talking about, you've hinted at like, systematic changes in technology and other things. So what is it about this journey that has made you an advocate beyond just caring for your father?
So that is a growth piece. No one becomes an advocate on the first day, in my opinion. They might be advocating, but an advocate to me is someone who's not a one-time, one-day, one-moment kind of situation. An advocate is someone that actually keeps pushing something forward over time. Now, I do want to go back on one word you did say, and I have to bring this up. It's a key word that many people don't realize. You said doing something what's best. Okay, versus I challenge people on some words. Sometimes many people have said, I don't know if I did this right. Okay, and I said, if you didn't do it right, you're kind of judging yourself where it might be wrong. And that's where guilt comes in, some self-judgment. And I've said, you know what, I've realized the beauty of caregiving, it's not about perfectionism, about being right. It's doing what's best. And I'm still going to screw up and fail. Okay, that's part of it, that there's going to be failure. Can we reduce those failures and increase those successes is what my approach was. And I think that's what everyone's approach is. But along the way, you kind of look at where a lot of the failures are happening. And I'm not afraid to talk about that. We're failing in many places. And it's where those failures are happening is where you can advocate and do some of that work. So, for example, it came back to technology. Let's pick technology, a space that I'm in. And I'll pick one challenge. My dad used to go missing. Okay, so that's a common trend for, and the numbers are out there. 6 out of 10 people who have a dementia will go missing at one point, okay, in their life. So let's just say flip of a coin. we were having those challenges, and it was one of those where I sought for some support and got some answers from everybody, use this technology. And again, this was back in around 2010, so 12 years ago. And at that point I realized, I said, okay, that's not enough for me. You're not actually giving me enough. And I have some other solutions. How come you're not promoting this? And it was just out of natural need that I said, okay, I need to bring in not just this GPS, but I'm going to bring in my neighbors, okay, to help. It's not just high tech. I'm going to bring in low tech. I'm going to bring in community to help keep my dad safe. Because some of the solutions are, and I get it, is, you know what, your dad's aggressive and he wants to go out for a walk, and here's a pill. That would come from one side. Or someone will say, lock him up in the house. Okay, that's another solution. I said, I get it, but I want him to be out there. I still want him to go and live life, but we need to make it safer. I need to increase the chances of him coming home. So all that, coming up with solutions, talking to enough people, being open to learning and getting ideas, even if they're crazy. Once you get those, it's a question of, well, okay, I could do that. Now, how come others can't do that? And then you start speaking up, you start raising your voice. Some will grow to that next stage. Some won't have the capacity, that they're just dealing with the fires, that they just have to deal with their own life. But over time, that patient, that caregiver voice, especially now in the past 5-10 years, you would have seen it there. It's growing, right? And you start with that voice. It's that voice. It's not just an opinion, but it's the voice, and then a suggestion, an idea, and then you start kind of pushing it, and right there you're already advocating for something. Whether it's good or bad, or right or wrong, you're starting to share your voice, and that's a big deal. And then who receives that voice and how you can move that forward, that to me is an advocate or a group of advocates, or that's where advocacy starts happening at a higher level.
There's questions for both of you. When you talk about the role of the caregiver, maybe, Elaine, thinking back to maybe what we've done before or didn't do before, what we're doing now, and same with you, Ron. Like, what was, what did you need back then that you weren't getting that maybe is accessible now, and like this evolution, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, how far have we come and how much further do we need to go?
Right. Well, we have quite a few programs, and right now we also have a Thursday night open discussion group. It's really a support group. We call it open discussion. This is not formal, topics or speakers that come, but people can just drop in, so they don't have to commit to. We have also a 6-week and an 8-week program, but they don't have to commit to the Thursday night. So we find that this has been really powerful for families to be able to share ideas, suggestions, and they're hugely supportive of one another. I see there's just a huge demand for that kind of just a venue, I guess, for families to just sort of vent. Some of them have connections with the Ontario Shores. They have family that are here or have been here. Others are just in the community and their loved one hasn't even got a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, but they're struggling. They're struggling to care for them. So, I mean, we have programs. I think for us, where the challenge is to get those families connected as members of the treatment team, to be kind of accepted as part and parcel of the treatment team. I think 99% of our staff want to involve families and do involve families, but we're finding that sometimes the communication isn't great. The families aren't always communicating in a way that's optimal because they're under stress. They're under huge stress. So we try to coach them and how they can ask questions in a way that isn't blaming, or to try and get the best response from the treatment team. So I think we're doing more to try and create that better relationship between the families and the clinical side, so that they can work nicely together. This is broader than just dementia care, but just in terms of what we do, I think we're trying to increase that relationship building for families. So we're taking it, I think, to that level now. And also encouraging patients, because patients don't always want to work with their family. There's often good reasons for that, but sometimes we want staff and we want families to work on that rapport with the family, so that maybe, In future, they will involve their family in their treatment. So it's sort of how do we kind of nudge people to have a better relationship, a better rapport with each other. So we coach families on how to do that. Sometimes it's just sort of standing back and saying to the family, I'm here if you need me. But if you don't want me to be involved right now, that's okay. But I'm here if you need me, and just being patient. So sometimes, they just need that encouragement. It's okay to stand back, but keep the line of communication open. So that's some of the things that we're doing.
And that for me is huge. Again, back from like 10, 12 years ago. It was there, but not to the level it is now, like here at Ontario Shores. The ability to create a space for people to speak, okay, to share, and also listen. Because when it comes to caregiving specifically, I always remind people, it's not you. You're not the first one going through this, okay? Even when I went through it, there are people that have gone through it before. Can I learn from them? Can I learn from the peers? So that peer support group is huge. So to create that space where you would have just, others that are at different stages, how valuable that is. So for Ontario Shores to do that, that's huge. The other piece also that we need to work on that's been changing is the narrative a bit, specifically around mental health, of course. That's a big one, but the narrative around the caregiver, okay, and their well-being and the value and their how much they give, okay, of their life, okay, and their time has to be addressed even more. And it's been changing. People understand that because technically, many times the caregiver's forgotten, okay? The people just assume, yes, okay, let's care for Ron's dad, or whoever the person, the loved one. But the caregiver is the one that I've always reminded. If the caregiver goes down, actually that damages the whole system as well. And that's being respected a lot more. The easy answer, everyone says, what do we need to do? Many times it's, we need more funds and money, okay? That's always a yes, but we need, more innovation, more programs, more services, more creative ideas. I would say a lot more human resources that understand this much more, okay? It's a heart business, everyone, for the most part that I know in the healthcare space, have a different level of heart and care. But the thing is, some of them do need more training and more skills, and we need to bring more to support them in that way. So that's kind of the space that I'm in, where I say where we've gone. And that shared voice, okay, so the shared decision-making, the ability that as long as you have a voice, especially if you're in a conversation with the healthcare team, is that the power's a little bit different now, okay, right? So I'm going to say that. So before it was more, we're going to speak to you as the patient or the caregiver, versus now the voice is rising for the, let's say, patient and the caregiver to actually have more say in what their health is, their future is. So there's a lot more respect for that, but we need still more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have patient and family advisors now. So we have family people with family experience who are involved in all of our quality councils and our overarching quality council, the Integrated Quality Committee. So they are bringing that perspective to the table now. They have lived experience, and so that helps to bring that voice to the forefront. The other thing you mentioned was innovation. Our families are asking for information on leading edge therapies. So they want to know about brain stimulation. They want to know about psychedelics. They want to know all the things that are kind of on the leading edge now. And so we're trying to provide education on some of those topics because they want to be able to ask their clinicians about this, and they want to be well-versed in being able to ask, is this something that would help my loved one, my daughter or my son? DNA testing, for example, to find the best medication fit, These are the things that they want to know about. So we're trying to give them that literacy, that health literacy, so they can be good advocates, because those things aren't always offered to them.
And just to add there, Daryl, one thing, Elena, is you're saying that over time, that patient and that caregiver actually sometimes has more information than the healthcare side.
Totally.
Right? So technically, even just asking the question, because of the access to technology and being online, okay, they're coming technically without them even realizing that they're advocating for this possible, idea or, solution that, the healthcare side has to kind of investigate now. So they're pushing, hey, we're interested in this.
Yeah.
Let us know about this,
Yeah.
right? So
That's really exciting.
It's shifting, but that's what's happening.
Can you talk about, maybe think back to your own experience? You're going through something like this, I imagine it's very isolating, and it sounds like, in the system, while things are not perfect, we are progressing towards supporting caregivers and providing resources. In the community, I would think there's still a lot of work to do in terms of awareness and understanding about dementia, and particularly the toll that can have on a caregiver. Somebody who's been through it. Like, what would you like, the general public or whomever in the community to know about the experience of a caregiver, if they, if and when, or I shouldn't say if, because we're all going to be impacted by this at some point. So what would you like them to know about your experience, or how to support somebody who's going through kind of this journey as a caregiver?
Yeah. So, well, both of us can answer because we're both caregivers. That's where you take off your work hat and you put on your personal hat on. Yeah. And that's going to happen. Everyone, who has their work hat or whatever label they are, will have a connection to caregiving some way. So for me, there's a whole list that I could go through, but I'll give one of the key ones I like to share is to be careful that caregivers try to be many times at the beginning of their journey, Superman or Wonder Woman. Okay, so if you guys know the superheroes, if you guys follow DC, there's there's Marvel and DC, but most people know Superman and Wonder Woman, and you just say, okay, I could do this, okay, and you might not even say you're going to be conscious of it, you just start doing it, okay, you start doing the role of caring. Oh, I'm going to take my dad to the doctor's appointment. That's caregiving right there, not realizing. And then it starts adding up, and it depends how slow or how fast. Sometimes the slower it is, sometimes you don't even realize how it's grown over time. That took me 5 years to say, oh my gosh, I'm a caregiver. And it was one where it started, affecting my life, that I realized, okay, I didn't share that with a lot of people at the beginning, but then over time I keep telling people, I said, if you can find those who you feel confident, comfortable with, and who you think you can trust, share. Okay, just share your situation. And be careful of being that Superman or Wonder Woman to try and do it all. Okay, because what happens is, caregiving doesn't have to be just dementia, it could be any type of caregiving, will take people down over time as it gets heavier. And a phrase I like to use is to spread the stress to increase caregiving success. And how you spread that is either you get a second or third person that can help out with maybe just picking up the groceries, okay? You can get technology that can allow my aunt all the way in California to have a meal with my dad, okay, virtually while my mom's taking a nap, okay? So those are just some examples of spreading the stress. And I said, just be careful of being Superman or Wonder Woman, being by yourself. Share, if you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, that actually will be a good investment to share with others, because many people do want to support if they can. You just kind of have to give them, sometimes you got to educate the others. Say, how could you help me? Maybe you can pick up the groceries for us, or you could actually spend half an hour with Dad on the phone or in a video call. So that's one of my suggestions, I would say, to the general community.
That's great, yeah. And I mean, it's going to be, because we're all going to be caregivers or receive care at one point or another in our life, there's that reciprocal element to it. So helping somebody else, it means that somebody else is more likely to step up and help. I mean, it is reciprocated, right? Yeah. That's well said. And I think also just, setting boundaries for caregivers. I think that if caregivers are doing more than they can handle, then they become resentful of their loved one, and that really kills the whole relationship that they have with them, especially if it's near the end of life. In the case of dementia, it's going to cut things short at some point. But as far as the community, and there's lots of resources in the community that we know of. Alzheimer's Society, we have a couple of community mental health programs that do all sorts of work with families as well, that we work with them. And sometimes families just aren't aware of what's out there, so we play a role navigating. We help to we have sort of a listing, and we often will search, even if they don't live in our area, we'll do a search for them. So just getting people to the things that are out there. There's actually more than we think sometimes. We just don't know about them, or just they're a well-hidden secret, But that navigation piece, yeah, and then families then, through word of mouth, then share with others. So that's a key role that we play as well. Yeah.
So that key piece of the connecting, just a simple ability to connect, and just plant a seed to someone. So again, back in the community, this could be someone who works at the coffee shop, at the variety store, the grocery store, the church that you're at. Okay, a lot of them already know, have lived it as well, that this is what caregiving is like, and I think this family is dealing with some challenges. Okay, and it's just simply saying, hey, Mike, just so you know, I know you're taking care of your dad, and it's been challenging. Do you get any other support from maybe an organization? Because there are a few out there. There's, you could go to Ontario Shores, you could go to this society, you could go there. That alone, the ability to plant seeds from the community, okay, to many families that are isolated, okay, as much as you get to see the families coming in now, we know that there's double, triple, quadruple, whatever, that are not even making it here or even aware. So that ability just to connect can change someone's life and journey and that family's journey just by planting that seed out in the community. So that, I think, is a key piece that you kind of brought up.
It's very powerful. Like, I think about it, maybe not in terms of dementia or caregiver, but like my own experience with loss and grief. When you're able to connect with somebody who has a similar experience, it is a powerful experience, right? In terms of helping that other person, but also healing yourself. And I would, just by what we talked about today, it would sound very similar, right? You are, with your head down, doing all this work, trying to get through this, and then you connect with somebody that is going through something similar, and it has to be, I can't imagine what that feeling is like, but it has to be somewhat comforting when you do run into somebody that has a similar experience.
Yeah, so again, emotions are a big deal in this space, and I always kind of pay attention to some of those words and emotions, like you threw out comforting. Yeah, so comforting is one. For those that who might still be going through it, that confidence, you brought up the word confidence. Mm-hmm. Okay, a lot of C words in caregiving, just so you know, okay? The challenges, even the soft C's out there. But it is one where, again, that peer support, the listening to others, or even passing it on to others. Mm-hmm. Okay, there is some teaching that I've always said, don't waste your caregiving, experiences, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it's a gift. Some people will not get that, but some will get it, that over time it's a gift that, hey, I can pass this on to another family, plant that seed, plant that idea. Yeah. Okay, and that's where that informal kind of conversations happen. Where Ontario Shores is about, okay, we have a service and program. Can we get them here? And and you just create that space. So, but yeah.
And in a weird way, COVID has helped us to reach out more, because we're doing all sorts of virtual things now that we didn't do before. So people don't have to drive here to do our open discussion group. They can do it from afar. So we've actually, we've got probably, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 families that are listed on that. And we probably get maybe 10 to 15 that show up each week, different array of people. But we see people who are at the real low points, talking more broadly than dementia. They've got loved ones who have run away and they don't even know where they are. They've got loved ones who, don't want to be on their medication and they're struggling with that. So all sorts of really, really challenging situations. And as things sometimes often do improve, they come back to the group and they talk about how things have improved, and then they give those who are now at the bottom that sort of hope that, I've been there, I know what this is like, just hang on, try this, maybe it will help, but don't give up. And it's amazing how many families have been uplifted and their situation improves, and they come back and then they act as encouragers for the others. So it's fabulous to see that,
Well, thank you both for being here. It's been a great discussion. The one thing maybe we'll close on, Elaine, is if you can just talk about the Family Resource Center and like different programs at Ontario Shores and how people can access that kind of support.
Sure. So we have a couple of sort of certified programs, that we call them. They're the RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Planning for Family Caregivers. It's an adaptation of the RAP that we do for clients at the hospital, and it's all about self-care. So that's an 8-week program. We'll probably do that in the fall. You can go online to our website. We do have a Family Resource Center webpage, and you can send us a note and ask to be on the wait list for that program. We also offer Powerful Tools for Caregivers. It was a collaboration with the Central East LHIN. It's a 6-week program and looks at things like communication, advocacy, self-care, dealing with emotions, all of those things. It's a general program for caregivers, not specific to mental health, but we offer it for mental health providers at the hospital here, again, online. And we have the open discussion group on Thursday evenings. Again, you can drop in. Just have to contact me at Family Resource Center at ontarioshores.ca, and we can send you the link, the Zoom link. So it just requires you to register for that. And we do have lots of materials at the Resource Center, both written and electronic, fact sheets on different topics. They can come in for a scheduled consultation by phone or in person. So there's lots of opportunities to connect with us.
Great.
Those are the main ones.
Well, it's been great connecting with you both, and thank you very much for sharing this experience.
Pleasure.
Thank you.